between the age of 25 and 35.
Two must-dos.
Two must-dos, and two things that you could probably avoid.
I could give you four probably: sex and drugs and rock and roll. that's three. That's you must do when you're young, because when you get older, you don't have the health for it. It's like Jagger himself said on David Letterman when he was asked to name the top 10 things he'd learned about 50 years after 50 years in rock and roll. His number one thing was you begin playing rock and roll so you could have sex and take drugs. But when after 50 years you have to take drugs so you can have sex and play rock and roll. By youth is for young people. Live your youth. I think of some of my friends who are just a little older than me, and it was a critical period. I was on the cusp of a lot of things. I was on the cusp of the last great set of popular music, and a lot of. I was on the right side of the cusp of the lifting of the harshest sexual repression in the Caribbean. Because guys just a little bit older than me, got married when they came out of A-levels so they could have sex.
Wow.
And so they then stuck with a woman who maybe they love them and maybe they give them a few good years, maybe a long time, maybe they were philosophical enough to make the most of it.
Yeah.
But guys who were in that kind of boat, I feel sorry for them. You're supposed to paint the town red when you're young. You're supposed to hang some genitalia on the walls like trophies, whether you're male or female.
Yeah.
That's part of. I was raised Catholic, so there's a lot of guilt associated with everything to do with sex because this is the Catholic ideal, really.
Yeah.
If you make, and it's the church ideal, any kind of religion, you sanctify sex, so therefore you can control people's. If you can control people's sexual behavior, you can control the behavior completely.
Yeah. Yep.
The only impulse more fundamental is the urge to defecate. And if the church could control defecation, it would. And constipation would be as prized as virginity and just as beneficial. There's nothing to be gained from going into your adult life in a state of sexual ignorance. So, all jokes aside, sex and drugs and rock and roll are things to do when you're young. Really, live well, party, don't hurt people. Try the golden rule: do unto others as you have them do unto you. You don't need more than that. Two things to avoid: sex and drugs and rock and roll. Right? you can't do too much of it. First of all, most people don't have the constitution for it, so you'll get ill. You'll mash up your body and you'll regret it later in life. So avoid people who are filled with hate. There are people who are motivated by ill will and spite and malice because it's beneficial to them. I mean, you can get to the highest elected office in the land, in the world, as Trump proves, by tapping into the really negative aspect of humanity. But it ain't good for you in the long run. Again, you only have to look at Donald Trump to see that. Could there be a more miserable man? He's got everything. And he's still a fat, unhappy son of a bitch. In fact, I wouldn't say that because that says something bad about his mother. He is the dick. He's the dick. Yeah. All right. So avoid negative people. Party hard. More than party hard. Work hard. Work hard. That old Churchillian thing is the absolute truth. That if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life. Yeah. I don't know. Do you know I'm a lawyer? I was called to the bar of Trinidad and Tobago in 1984. I was enrolled as a solicitor of the Supreme Court of England and Wales in 1988 or 89. And I worked for a few years as a lawyer, and then abandoned that. I really wasn't suited for it, you know. The levels of hypocrisy were too great to have to deal with every single day. I mean, I wouldn't mind it once a week. I could have been a priest, you know, fake it on Sunday for church, but every day you had to be. I did a case for a solicitor representing a football club, and she was very pleased with how I handled it, but couldn't bring herself to brief a male barrister who wore earrings. So I thought she sent a message to me that if I took off the earrings, she would brief me. She'd send me work. So I took off the earrings. I always said I'd wear them unless they cost me money. And so I took them off and threw them on my desk. Met her in the coffee shop in the Old Hall of Justice. Old Hall of Justice coffee shop. It's the same Hall of Justice. And I saw when she looked at my hair. And when I got back to chambers, I had 3 new briefs on my desk.
Wow.
So that's hypocrisy. So I wasn't good at that. But more than that, I really always loved writing. And I asked Mice Raymond, who is the music producer, who was just in my feature, Trinity to the Bone, earlier this year. And I asked him what was the best thing about working in music. And he said that when he finished working, he thought, I get paid for doing this? You know? It's, so I don't get paid much, but I do get paid for doing what I would pay to do.
Yeah.
It has not been work for ever. It's always been. And the way the world is set up now, with more and more wealth being concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer people, this is something that blows my mind and makes me. It's one of the handful of things that makes me almost glad that I have to die at some point, just to be out of shit like this. That 42 individuals, 42 people control the same amount of wealth as the bottom half of the world's population. Yeah. That's 42 to 4 billion. 42 people have the same amount of wealth as 4 billion. Now this is the world we live in. So, especially in that kind of insane world, if you're lucky enough to find something that you like doing, do that. Because you've been doing it 10 or 12 hours a day. And you better get satisfaction out of that. Of course, you have to have a plan. My son he's very, very funny. And he's already in stand-up comedy. He's only 18. He's living in London. He's exploring those routes. But I tell him, you have to have a backup plan, because your first responsibility is to pay your rent.
Yeah.
You know? You can't say you are the God's gift to comedy or writing or cricket or anything, and you can't feed yourself.
Yeah.
And so you have to have a plan. But by all means, this is why I said I give people bad advice. Because I would tell them, maybe it mightn't work out like that for everybody. Maybe if you spent 30 years working at a job that wasn't respected, like writing is not respected in the Caribbean, writing for newspapers, which is even less respected, and newspapers are a medium that are gasping their last death throes. Even within that context, I think I've been very fortunate to have had the impulse to leave the practice of law and to practice writing and try and get better at it. If I'd spent the last 30 years working as a lawyer, I'm pretty sure that I'd have been buried already. I'd remain a smoker and a heavy drinker and in a high-stress job, and work would have been work. The rewards would have been, financial rewards would have been far greater, but my family would have buried me already. I would be So
So that answers the third question, which would have been, do you believe in following your bliss? And clearly, without even probably saying it, you followed what felt like a path of least resistance for you.
Well, it wasn't on least resistance at all. It was a path of very great resistance. I was born into a family that, not a Catholic family. There's a time in Trinidad. Again, I came just after this, when every Catholic family had 9 or 10 or 11 children, and unfailingly produced every generation a doctor, a lawyer, and a priest. My father was an atheist. But I was raised Catholic, and I remained Catholic till I was in my 20s probably. But he was a professional man, and he was self-employed. He started his own business, and the last thing my father wanted me to do was write. It was very, very difficult to be able to write. My father far preferred me to be a lawyer, to be a businessman, because these are things that had respect, and more than that, he knew I'd be able to pay my bills.
Yeah.
So it was not at all the path of least resistance. It's very difficult. When I left, I'd left private practice, and I'd gone in because I got married, and I'd gone into the Board of Inland Revenue. I was working as a tax lawyer. Me as a tax lawyer, and I still I still get kicks as that. And then from there, I went to the Express to become a reporter, Class A reporter. And I remember my parents, my father didn't even dignify the knowledge that I'd given him that I'd left Inland Revenue and joined the Express with an answer. And my mother said, she turned back, she said, "I tell you that boy head ain't good." So it wasn't that I had parental support, quite the opposite. But I'll tell you, and it may not be true for everybody, because as you get older, you find shit out that you can't find out when you're young. Like most people, until they're 35, most men have no idea that they're going to die, no real idea. And then after 35, they can't think about anything else. So it may not be right for everyone. As you get older, you find, there's shit about painting the great masterwork of Trinidad and the Caribbean that's going to make Peter Doig shame. Isn't worth being penniless. So I hedge my bets, and people have to be sensible about what they do, because we're living longer, and you have to provide for yourself for a lot longer. And now we have medicine is now following the insane American model of healthcare for profit.
Yeah.
All this lunacy that's happened in my lifetime. I say all that to say you have to be careful that you don't follow my advice blindly. But I'm so glad, because I'd rather be where I am now and have spent my life working at something I love than have plenty more money, and have spent all my life working at something I did not love. And then I'd be something, I didn't not like law. There's a lot of intellectual reward in doing law. And there are a lot of great moments. I was a barrister, I was a courtroom advocate, and to be on your feet in court was exciting. It's like playing football at a high level. So there were a lot of enjoyable aspects of it, but not like, when I sit down to work, my mind is so clear, and my more than that, my spirit is so clear. I'm uncluttered, and when the time comes, and you never know when it's going to come, but when the time comes that I have to croak, and if I have the knowledge that these are going to be my last breaths, I could tell you, even if that happens 30 years from now, I know, because of how I've lived the 30 years gone, that I'll be ready, and I'll look back and I will think, yes, that was the way to go. And it won't matter if they bury me in a plywood box rather than a marble mausoleum. Because what would be the point of that? To have a wonderful, ornate monument to yourself, and you lived what you really had. You squandered what you really had, which was the time to make connections and to help people.
Well said.
Amongst the very best things in my life is my family. Don't go looking for a soulmate. There's no such thing. Better you look for an asshole mate than a soulmate, because it's easier to deal with an asshole mate than a soulmate, because you can leave him or her. But if you find yourself somebody you could create a good family life with, that's the greatest richness you can have. Not many people have it. I can't think of a single functional family. My own direct family, my wife and my 2 children, we get along very well. But it's as close as I've come to seeing a functional family. It's hard work, but it is the most rewarding work that there is, because you really are rich if you have human connections that last your whole life, like you do with if you're lucky, your parents and your siblings. Most of us aren't lucky, because most families quarrel, people split up, marriages end. But if you work hard, if you're dedicated, and if you're honest with yourself, and if you are prepared to negate the aspects of yourself, because you can't fix anybody else, you can only fix yourself, that prevent you from playing a responsible, healthy role in a healthy family. If you can strive for that, it's the best thing that there can be. I turned 60 last year, and my wife threw a surprise party for me. I was the only person who didn't know my favorite rock and roll band of all time, Joint Pop, a Trinidad band, played my birthday concert. It was amazing. And the high point of it was them playing a great song called Let's Pray for Rock and Roll. And I had my wife and my daughter and my son, 4 of us in the mosh pit.
Sweet.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you can swing that, your children loving you when they're adults, and you respecting your spouse and letting your spouse be whoever he or she might be, and you still be yourself, you're onto a winner.
Sweet.
That's like Chelsea winning the league every year, forever. Okay.